let's talk about how we can improve our project estimates using the 3-point estimating tool. So as we work through projects, large or small, it's really hard to come up with how long something's going to take. But that's often critical in project management and being able to give estimates to our leadership or other customers about how long we feel something's going to take. Also, too, time is money, so we have to make estimates in terms of budgets. And if we get this wrong, it can have huge impacts on whether a project is deemed successful or not. And so there's a lot of tools that we can use to help us with that. Now, if you just kind of go off the cuff and off the top of your head, it's going to lead to bad results. But more of an organized tool like a 3-point estimate can really help you out. As we've used 3-point estimates here at Triumph, it's really led us to projects that come in right on time. And it's not that the tool is magical, but it's the fact that it walks you through a structured way of thinking through your estimate that really is what's getting us the success. And I think you'll find here that this tool, this 3-point estimating tool, is not something complex. It's not something hard, and it doesn't take a lot of extra time, but it gives you a very, very accurate number. So what are the advantages of a 3-point estimate? Well, first of all, it increases the accuracy of the estimate. I mean, that's what we've already talked about. That's super important. It also reduces the temptation to pad estimates. When we're not quite sure of the number, if we don't know about the accuracy, we're tempted to say, well, I don't want to, get it wrong, so I'm going to pad it, because most of the time people are a little bit more forgiving if I did it quicker than if I did it longer. So I'm just going to say it's going to take a little longer, but I don't really know because I'm not really putting the structured time in here to think about it. And so there's a temptation to sometimes pad our numbers. It also reduces cost for fixed bid projects, and there's fewer surprises on time and material projects. So at Triumph, we try, when possible, to do fixed bid projects. We feel like there's this less risk for everybody involved, especially for our church clients. We don't want them to have any surprises. So when possible, we do fixed bid projects. And of course, that's when these 3-point estimates are super important for us, because we don't want to add padding to these projects, because we want them to be very efficient and cost effective. But at the same time, we're kind of on the dime for that, so we got to make sure we get it right. And even when it's a time and material projects, we really want to be on the dot. Like, we don't want to say something's going to be really expensive and it comes in much cheaper. That's kind of holding up budget money that could have been done. Other ministry could have been done with that. But it also increases the confidence from stakeholders. So maybe you're just doing this internally. It's still going to increase the confidence for your stakeholders. You're going to be able to give them a much more detailed number. And I think they're going to trust your number also too, because they're going to look back and see that, oh, wow, you actually thought through this and you have a tool. And the results are just going to show that they're going to have increased confidence over time as they start to see you hit those numbers very accurately. It also helps you a little bit too to understand the risk of each task, and so you're going to see that as we walk through this. It's going to help you identify, hey, these tasks, you're kind of uncertain on that. And so there's high risk, and if you see that risk on those specific tasks, you might put your eye on that a little bit better. Now, all this kind of goes into an approach that we have at Triumph is ready, aim, fire. Now, you might think, well, of course, like that's the right way to do it. But we live in a world that's really fire, 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 fire. We just like to push the button. Like, we don't really want to prepare. We don't really want to aim. We just want to fire. And that's not to say that we want to be slow. Like, ready, aim, fire is not slow. In fact, it's very, very, very fast. The Navy SEALs have a saying that slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And we've kind of internally, we kind of just say slow is fast, kind of shorten that even further. So ready, aim, fire is not like code speak for just go slow. It's actually, we want to be very, very, very fast, but we must first prepare, and then we'll be ready. Abraham Lincoln's very famous for having a quote saying, hey, if I was given an hour to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 45 minutes sharpening the axe. And that's definitely the ready, aim, fire approach. And this 3-point estimate is the first step in getting ready. Now, We're going to go over some math on this. I just want to tell you right now, you don't need to know the math. We have an Excel spreadsheet that we'll show you at the end that's going to do all the complex math for you. So if you start to kind of go cross-eyed a little bit with some of this, don't worry. I just want to explain how it's done, but you really don't need to know how it's done if you just use the Excel spreadsheet that we'll give you a link for at the end. But you know, it's not hard math, but I just wanted to kind of warn you that if you start to get a little cross-eyed, it's okay. We'll get to the easy stuff, and you can still do it with this Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so let's just take a fictitious small project. I've been called to make a simple 2-page website. And so I got to write some content, I got to get some images, set up the site, create a theme, make the home page, make the contact page. I want a workflow for that contact page. I got to make a workflow, and then I need to do some test and polish. So the old way of doing it would maybe, if you're lucky, this is called a work breakdown structure. So I've broken my work down into little nuggets, and now I'm going to estimate each one of those nuggets. So if you're just ready, aim, fire, maybe you might have made this work breakdown and made this little list, and that might have been good enough for you. A lot of people probably wouldn't even do that. They'd probably just say 2-page website. I don't know, like let's just say like 5 days. But you were a little bit more structured. You made your work breakdown structure, made a little estimate. Okay, so that's a great 1-point estimate. But if we want to do a 3-point estimate, what we're going to do is we're going to take these same numbers, going to kind of slide them over, and we're going to say, hey, these are our most likely hours that it's going to take to do each of these things. 2 hours to write the content, 1 hour to go get the images, set up the site. So we're going to take our most likely. That takes a lot of pressure off of us. We're not thinking, oh gosh, I have this one number I got to get this just right. We're just going to sit back and say, what's the most likely number for that event? Then we're going to say, well, what if everything just goes well? What if everything's right in the world that day and everything's just going our way? What's the optimistic number for that event, that item? And then we'll do the same, but on the pessimistic side. So, well, maybe things don't go right. So what you can see is this is a really great brainstorming tool. It takes a lot of the pressure off because you can just kind of go, okay, I don't need to worry too much about worst case. I'm just going to go right down the middle. What's my most likely? Then I can be optimistic and pessimistic. Now, if you note here, I want to call out a few items here. You can note here that the ones that are starred, if you look at it, the difference between the most likely and the pessimistic is quite large. And so it's hard to see that in the numbers, but I'm going to show you later that you can actually see it in our tool. And those are the ones that are probably most at risk. Like perhaps I'm not a great writer. I don't feel confident about my writing. So I think, well, maybe I don't like it. I have to keep rewriting it. Or maybe setting up that CMS site. Maybe I've only done that once before. I feel a little uncertain, or I'm not great with workflows. That pessimistic score is going to naturally kind of identify those things for us, and it's going to highlight that. Okay, so we've got our 3 points, but now we need to do some calculations. So to calculate a 3-point estimate, the estimate is going to be equal to the optimistic score plus the most likely score times 4 plus the pessimistic score divided by 6. Okay, so I'm guessing you have a few questions. Like, why would we multiply the most likely score by 4? Well, it's because it's most likely. And so we want to weight that option higher than the rest. Okay, so then you might be thinking, well, why the 6? Well, if we look at it, if we give like a 1 to the optimistic, a 4 to the most likely, and a 1 to the pessimistic, if you add up those numbers, you get 6. So this is kind of our normalizing denominator. So because the top actually sums up to 6 units, we need to divide by 6 to get our estimate. So, pretty easy. Now, there's a couple ways you can actually calculate a 3-point estimate. This is the PERT method. It's probably the most popular one. There's a couple others, but for the most part, just use the PERT method. Just use this equation. But you should know that there are a couple other ways you could do it. Okay, so if we did our little math here, we go back to our little spreadsheet. Our estimate, our 3-point estimate is 27.17 hours. And you might think that's great, but if I just done it the easy way, it would have been 26. It's close enough. It's only off by an hour and some change. But we're not done yet. Okay, so this is just our 3-point estimate. Let's look at some other information. But before we do, we need to give a brief introduction or reintroduction to some quick, easy statistical terminologies. Okay, so let's look at a bell curve. Okay, so we know many things in life and a ginormous amount of things, a surprising amount of things fall on a bell curve. And so the middle point is really our average or our median value. So that's our kind of the most likely. And then we have things that fall on either side. Some things come quicker, some takes longer, some things are taller, some things are shorter. Everything in life kind of falls on this bell curve. Bell curves also have another thing called standard deviations. So we know that within one standard deviation from the mean, from the middle, that we can be 68% confident that a random value will fall in that shaded dark space. Okay, so that's just a characteristic of bell curves. 68% of the time, values will be within one standard deviation. And if we look at two standard deviations, we can feel confident that 95% of the values will fall within that area. So we can use this to actually make our 3-point estimate much more robust. So the first thing we have to do is calculate a standard deviation. So a standard deviation, noted by a lowercase sigma, is equal to the pessimistic score minus the optimistic score divided by 6. So in our example here, our standard deviation is 4.2. Okay, so that's just showing you the math right there. So that means, if I understand this bell curve, that if my mean is 27.2, I can be 68% confident that the project will come in between 23 hours and 34 hours. Now imagine taking that to your leadership and saying, well, I'm guessing that the project's going to take 27 hours, but at most probably going to be about 31, but we could be optimistic. We could actually be in 23. That's showing a lot more confident. They're now kind of being able to tell, like, okay, well, I can see where the range is. I feel comfortable with that range. But that's 68% confident. Maybe you might choose to be a little bit more confident. And in this case, you could go to 2 standard deviations and say, hey, I'm 95% certain that will be between 35 and a half and 18.8 hours. Now that's quite a bit more of a spread. So maybe 2 is too much, and you don't have to be 1 or 2. You can be anywhere in between. You can calculate it to be like 1.5 if you want. But the way I would phrase it is, hey, our maximum value is probably going to be about 35, or on the high side will be about 35 and a half. On the low side will be 18, but we're targeting about 27. That gives people a lot of information of how what to expect from your project. Okay, so I warned you this is a little bit of math, but don't worry, super simple. We have a spreadsheet for you that you can download from our website. There's the address, and it's going to do all the heavy lifting for you. Okay, so now you might look at this and go, that's a lot of numbers, but let's zoom in on that. The tasks are all the same ones that we looked at. This spreadsheet will calculate everything for you. All you got to do is put in the values in blue. So again, that's kind of the easy part. Just write out your work breakdown structure on the far left. Once you're done with that, then I would go down the most likely column, and I would just kind of say, okay, most likely, what am I thinking here? And then I go back to the optimistic side. And then lastly, I usually do the pessimistic side and just go, okay, what am I thinking here? What could go wrong? And then it's going to generate everything else for me. On top of that, notice the little color codings, the red, the green, and the yellow. That's signifying and kind of highlighting, hey, you don't feel very confident about these items. And that's not bad. That's actually good. It's basically telling you these are the ones that you feel less certain about. So you might put more attention to them, which in general is going to bring them in a shorter amount of time. The more attention you give to them, the more thinking you put towards them, the more likely you're going to hit that likely number and not the pessimistic number. Pessimistic numbers often come because we take our eye off the ball and they sneak up and get us. But if we're kind of putting that from day one, looking at those are the ones that you're most you have the most risk on, you're probably going to get them right more often than not when you have your eye on those balls. Now it's calculating all this for us. Now you might be thinking, but wait, hold on. You said that you could change that sigma value, and you can. So we have a tab down at the bottom that has settings, and on the settings tab, all you got to do is play with one value, and that's the confidence level. And so just change that confidence level to whatever you feel comfortable with. We put a little bit of a key on the right there. And so it can kind of remind you what the confidence levels would be for certain percentages. And here's what I would recommend. Start at a confidence level of 2, which is 95%. So that's kind of a larger range. And as you get more and more comfortable with your 3-point estimating, start shrinking that down. And you probably want to shrink it down to, when you get better at it, to about 1.44. So that's about 85%. You get anything a little bit less than that, you're kind of getting on a little bit on the risky side of not being within your range. And that's still a great place to be. That 85% is still giving you a good range. And so you don't want to get that down, definitely not down to 0. But even 1 is you're getting a little tight. So start at 2, work your way down to 1.44. And if you feel comfortable going further from there, you can. So that's a 3-point estimate, and we hope that you use that. I think it'll give you a lot more confidence in yourself on your estimate, but it's also going to give your leadership or the people that you're working with confidence, knowing that you spent the time to go through this and you're giving them a good range based on solid statistics and a really great tool.